First, I want to thank you all for coming out this evening, and for those of you watching on cable TV. We do recognize that the Oakland A's are playing a game tonight, so we're assuming some people may watch this on cable, or at least we certainly hope so. We also want to express our appreciation to the mayoral candidates for participating in tonight's election forum. My name is Georgia Gates Durr, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Alameda. To talk a little bit about the League, and then we'll get the evening started. First of all, the League of Women Voters, our mission, and we've been around a long time, our mission has always been to encourage active and informed citizen participation in our democracy. The League of Women Voters is a multi-tiered grassroots organization, local, regional, state, national. The League of Women Voters is a multi-issue political organization. We have many positions, and positions in League speak means what we mean, it's our platform, it's what we stand for. Those positions have been developed over years based on studies and membership consensus. That's how we have positions. Those positions are filed under 3 categories, and you can go to any League website and you can find the positions. The 3 categories: government, natural resources, and social policy. That's where all of our positions can be found. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan. We never endorse candidates. Let me repeat that. We never support or oppose any candidate. We are nonpartisan. That being said, the League does take advocacy positions, and this is where it can get a little confusing for our voters, where they misunderstand what's going on. I shouldn't say it quite like that. It's confusing sometimes for us. The League wears 2 hats. We try to keep them separated, but we wear 2 hats. Most everyone is familiar with voter service. Voter service, it's voter education. We register voters. We host political and candidates forums like we're doing this evening. We write and publish pros and cons on ballot measures. We produce the Easy Voter Guide. We also manage the online guide for elections. Non-biased, it is nonpartisan, it's balanced information. Those are some of the items that would fall under voter service. This is also another League word. We call these portfolios. Voter service, and then action. And this is advocacy. We keep them separated, but we are a political organization and we do advocate. We advocate for measures that we think benefit our communities and help to protect democracy. When we take a recommendation, or when we recommend another League word, it means we're endorsing. We do that based on positions, based on our platform, based on our stand. The action that you might see, we lobby, we write letters to the editor, we do presentations. There's a host of things that we do, but we do make a recommendation. We only make a recommendation if we have a position, oppose or support. If we don't have a position, you'll see no stand or no position. And there's one more category. If the membership, we have a position, but membership can't reach a consensus on whether to support or oppose an issue or a measure, a ballot measure, then we stay neutral. Our stance is neutral. So that is how the League of Women Voters, that's how we function. And I know our membership chair will get mad at me if I don't say, there's Doris over there, if I don't say the League of Women Voters has been around for 100 years. Our motto is empowering voters Protecting Democracy. If that sounds like an organization you might be interested in, we'd love for you to consider joining us. You can stop by our membership table or go to the League's website. It's lwvalameda.org, and we'd love for you to consider joining us. And with no further ado, please welcome me in joining the moderator of tonight's Candidates and Issues Forum, Ken Warner.
Thank you, Georgia. My name is Ken Warner, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters. I am not only a member of the League of Women Voters, but I'm also on the board of the Alameda League, as well as now I'm on the board of the Bay Area League. So I've once again overextended myself, and I don't know what I was thinking. But be that as it may, one little commercial as Georgia did, as she did, I just wanted to remind everyone, I would assume since you're here that you're pretty focused on political issues and things like that. I want to make sure that all of you are registered to vote. The last day of registration is October 22nd. In order to vote on what day? Thank you, Ms. Quick. Very good. All right, let's get started with our interesting evening tonight. The focus of the forum this evening will be the candidates for the mayor of the city of Alameda. Can you hear okay? Am I okay? All right. Our format this evening will be a modified debate format. The League has provided each candidate in advance a copy of the basic ground rules, which I will outline for the audience now. Number one, the audience will refrain from applauding or in other ways demonstrating support or non-support for a candidate. Hold your applause. There will be no video or audio recordings during the event except what is being done by the League, which will be posted to our website. Please do not stream with your phones or anything like that. Candidates will remain seated during the debate at all times, will not use props, will not interrupt one another, nor refer to another candidate in their responses. The moderator, that would be me, will have the responsibility to enforce time limits or interrupt proceedings to enforce the ground rules and the agreed format. Questions from the audience will be submitted in writing and may be restated by the moderator. As you can see, Georgia is walking around the room with index cards. If you would like to write a question, please take a card and she will pick it up, and we will have the question group sort them correctly. So next thing, I would like the candidates to please come forward and be seated. There are 3 candidates for one position. They have drawn numbers for the order in which they will speak and be seated, and the order is as follows. Ms. Herrera Spencer first, followed by Mr. Matarisi, followed by Ms. Ezzy Ashcraft. Please have a seat. Please. Thank you very much. So each candidate will be allotted 2 minutes for an opening statement. After the opening statements, we'll move to a period of written questions submitted by the audience or prepared by the League of Women Voters. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. The order of answering will be rotated based upon the opening order. Cards, again, are available. There are pages around the room who will offer cards and pens. We will try to cover a variety of topics in the limited time allocated, and please understand that we may not be able to ask all of the questions presented. We encourage you to speak directly to the candidates at the close of the evening. At the end of the question period, each candidate will have 2 minutes to give a closing statement. The order of closing statements will be in the reverse order of the opening statements. In the interest of fairness and the equal allocation of time, All answers will be timed and time limits will be enforced. Our timekeeper is the famous Marion Breitbart. Let's hear it for, she's tough as nails, so don't try to squeeze another second. Our timer will be giving a 30-second warning with a yellow card, a yellow paddle, excuse me, and then a signal to stop with a red paddle. Very good. When the time has expired. We ask each candidate to please adhere to the time limits. Our question sorters, the ones who get the cards and then look them over and combine them, are Michelle Ellison and Susan Hauser, somewhere. Where is she? Oh, I didn't see her. Thank you. Michelle and Susan. Excellent. Thank you. We had a change at the last minute due to illness. So we're going to get started now with our opening statements. I'd like to call upon Ms. Spencer.
Try again. I'm Tricia Rose Spencer, Mayor. I'm your mayor if you live here in Alameda. I'm assuming all of you do live here. And it's been honestly a privilege and an honor to be your mayor for the last 4 years. I have also been a member of the League, and I want to thank the League for their service. It is important that we have these events to educate our community and our voters specifically. For those of you that don't know, prior to being your mayor, I was on the school board for 6 years, supporting our students, families, teachers, staff at our sites to provide quality education for all students. Prior to that, I was PTA Council President, volunteering at our schools, overseeing all the PTAs and assisting all of our schools throughout our district, which is honestly very, very important to me. As mayor, I have tried to continue my service to everybody that lives here or works here in our community. I am seeing many, many events supporting the efforts of our community, whether it's arts, conservation. In fact, in regards to conservation, I recently received emails from many students, and we stepped up and we are trying our hardest to get rid of single-use plastics. My website is mayortrish.com. You can always either contact me through the website. I'm always available by phone, and many of you have my phone and you call me. And honestly, at the end of the day, I promise to continue to serve at this highest level, implementing best practices to better serve every Alamedan. Right on stop.
And now Mr. Batteries.
Thank you, and I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight to hear the candidates, and I think we have to put aside a lot of the static that's in the air around campaign time and get to know the candidates, hear what they have to say, go to their websites. This is unnerving. When you go to my website or when you talk to me, I would like to tell you what my experience has been and what I intend to do for the city. I have served you as a city council member from 2002 to 2010, and I had the honor of working on a number of projects, the library, the new theater, and in those instances, when I look at what's going on today, we have some really very strong issues that make the early 2000s look very easy and doable. My goal is to keep Alameda thriving. I intend to conduct myself and to focus the council on the work that's in front of us, and I will commit to being civil and to keep us in focus on what we have to do in the city of Alameda. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Marilyn Ezzy Ashcraft. I want to thank the League for hosting us tonight and for all the wonderful work they do. I'm a longtime proud member of the League of California Cities, And I'm also very proud to have served Alameda as your city council member and vice mayor for the past 6 years, and 6 years on the planning board before that. I have been involved in this community for a long time. We're not supposed to reference other candidates in our remarks, but I'm sitting next to a gentleman with whom I co-chaired the campaign to build a new library. And I grew up in Alameda. I didn't always live here. I'm not fourth generation. I was born in San Francisco. And I will say, I don't care how long you've lived in Alameda, how long or how short, you're part of our city, and we welcome your participation. What I say from having grown up here is that Alameda is a better city today than it was when I grew up, because we are a more diverse, ethnically, culturally diverse city that just enriches all of us in our community. My three main focus points for if I'm elected mayor are in no particular order, because they all need to be worked on together. Housing, affordability, availability, homelessness, traffic and transportation, and protecting our city, our island city, from the impacts of climate change, especially sea level rise. These are serious issues that need serious, dedicated leadership, and I am so looking forward to answering your questions tonight, hopefully with a working microphone. Thank you.
I think we have one. Yay. Okay, thank you very much, candidates. Maybe without a hump, I'm not sure. We're now going to move to the question period. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond to each question. We're going to start off with some league questions for the candidates. Okay, the first question is, what are the major pros and cons of a strong mayor versus weak mayor form of local government?
Now that I've flubbed the introduction, I'll try and answer this question. What are the major pros and cons of a strong mayor form of government versus the manager-council form of government? I've always had the belief that a strong mayor form of government is a more direct and accessible form of government, since the person who's responsible as the chief executive for the city, for city operations, is directly answerable to the people. And I think the form of government which we have has its advantages as well, because in the current setting, we're all individuals who basically volunteer. We make policy. The actual operation and running of the city is by the city manager, and that individual has responsibility for directing all the departments, hiring and firing the department heads. This is a more efficient form of government, but I believe, and my personal preference is that I believe that we have to have the people who are in charge directly answerable to the people. And the best way to do that, it's sloppy, it's messy, but it's the best way, in my opinion, is to have that be an elected individual and separate that, similar to what happened in Oakland.
Thank you.
So the major con to a strong mayor form of government, as I see it is dependent on that individual. And so, yeah, I mean, we have some stellar examples next door in Oakland. Libby Schaaf is, I think, an amazing, strong mayor. I'm quite impressed with London Breed from what we've seen of her in San Francisco. But not everyone comes to the job of mayor with that kind of background and those kinds of credentials. So you're putting a lot of responsibility for running the city, for hiring and firing department heads in one individual. What I like about the form of government that Alameda has, and I will be the first one to say, as you may have noted, we've had a tumultuous last year in Alameda. We can do better. But what I think should happen with a well-run council meeting is that should be democracy in action. The citizens should be able to witness council members having discussions, debating the issues, taking into account different perspectives and points of view, and coming to a conclusion. So I think that there is no perfect form of government. I think the form that we have now is preferable. I think we can do better. As they say, democracy is messy until you consider the alternatives, but it's something that we continually work toward improving, and all of you informing yourselves, getting out and voting, help choose those best elected officials to govern you as a body. Thank you.
Mr. Spencer.
All right, good evening, and if you can't hear me in the back, just raise your hand. You can't? Okay, I'm going to try to project more. So, I actually like to call it a strong city manager versus a strong mayor system. It's easier for me to understand what we're really talking about. We currently have the strong city manager system. So, as was earlier said, the council hires the city manager hires all the employees underneath them. So, as your mayor, when I get a complaint about an employee or planning department getting a permit, all the problems getting a permit, I can't go to that department and say, I got this complaint, da-da-da-da-da. I actually have to go to the city manager, let them know, and then it's up to the city manager to address it. And if you look at the turnover of city managers, not just in our city, but across every city that has this form of government, the average time a city manager stays in that job is like 3.5 years. Very, very short. And we know they all make over $300,000. I, as your mayor, last year made $15,000, 15000, and that includes monies I get from serving on different commissions, regional commissions. Big difference, right? And I personally do support our community having that conversation of considering a strong mayor system. That way, whomever the mayor is, and personally, you have my opinion, every time any of us are elected, we are qualified people. We are. We have education, we've worked in different businesses. We know, most importantly, we know our community better than anyone that pops in, does their 3.5 years, and pops out. So I hope we do have that conversation, we consider it, and honestly, I've lived here for 20 years. I care about our community.
Thank you very much. Our next question is also from the League. It's a little longer, so you may want to take notes. The attorney contracted to investigate claims of charter violations stated in his report, quote, "The right to hold public office, either by election or appointment, is one of the valuable rights of citizenship. The exercise of this right should not be declared prohibited or curtailed except by plain provision of law." The question about that is, what steps will you take, if elected as our mayor, to ensure that the charter provision for removal from office for malfeasance, in quotes, is clarified and policies regarding implementation are considered by the city council?
That is a very good and serious, timely, relevant question. That is something that the council discovered in going through the very messy investigation, and you've all read it now because it was released to the public, is that there are certainly provisions about what you don't do. For instance, interfere with the city manager's duty to hire or fire department heads, except for our 3 direct reports as city council members. But then the charter was not clear about what steps are then taken. Now, the investigator said in his report something to the effect that, well, the voters will make that decision, and indeed they might, in come November, come another election. But it did occur to me at the time, and it still does, and it's something I would commit to do as mayor, that we need to go in and do some cleanup and some amendment to our charter specifically for that, because it's a matter of the public trust. I can't tell you how many times when I go walking door to door, people want to know, so what's happening? And I mean, there are still some threads out there that are being looked into. at the district attorney's level, but even so, we need to be able to say to the public, okay, there was a finding, this was the finding, and now this is what needs to happen. But with the charter silent right now, that we are at a disadvantage. It also takes a council that is willing to roll up their sleeves and tackle uncomfortable issues, but issues of self-governance of a council. And I'm very committed to that sort of transparency, and I would definitely champion it. Thank you. So far, so good on the microphone.
All right, so during the past, I'm going to say 1.5, 2 years that we had this issue with the city manager in front of us, the standard that I was trying my hardest to do was best practices. That was it. And honestly, as a council, I think that when we do that, regardless of how the decision landed, I believe we as a council honored best practices. We did hire an outside investigator. We did the request as a council. The attorney was actually hired through the city attorney's office. Then we made a decision that all of us as council, and I read the decision from closed session during a public meeting, that we would essentially sit back and wait and let the independent investigator do their work. During that time, anyone that emailed me anything about they support this Jill, they don't support her, what will I do? My response was always, I will honor the process. And I will wait and see where the independent investigator lands. And then from that point, then I will figure out, after reading the report, the recommendation, what to do next. And in regards to the question, it will actually take an action by council, not the mayor. The mayor is one council member when it comes to votes, and it is through council that we determine actions that we take. So in this issue, we'll be coming back to council to determine what to do next. However, in the meantime, we are waiting to hear from the DA whether or not the decision, whenever the action ends, if they take any action or not. So we are still waiting to hear what's happening, and at some point it will come to council to listen to the independent investigator's report and figure out what we're going to do in regards to cleaning up our charter.
When I was first elected in 2002, part of the orientation was to read the city charter and to have it walk through with the city attorney to explain what my duties and responsibilities were as a council member, what the duties and the responsibilities were for each city officer, the city manager, the city clerk, and the city attorney. I think that therein lies the first problem, is there was a violation of the charter. There was behavior that was just this side of violation of the spirit of the charter. You can read the report. And I think that's the most important thing, is we have to make sure that we hold our elected officials, all of us, accountable for following the constitutional document, which a charter is, following that. And if it does have to be changed, the change is proposed to the electorate. The charter can only be changed by a vote of the people. In the past, we've had charter review committees, a city council committee, and I think that is something that the mayor can focus the council on and propose to the council that, look, we've had this problem. Part of the remedy is, well, what happens if someone is in violation of the charter? We also have other provisions in the charter that are unstable or antiquated that need to be updated. So I think a charter review committee is a good thing for the council to consider. And as the leader, the official, and the presiding officer of that council, this is one remedy that I think the mayor and as I being mayor, I would want to propose and to convince that we need to do this.
Thank you. So, each of you, who are the major financial supporters of your campaign?
Okay, so I think I've raised just over $5,000 to date. My number one donor was $1,000, and it is someone in the audience, Mr. Jim Sweeney. And I have been very, very supportive of the parks in our community for many, many years, and I'll take this opportunity to thank Mr. Sweeney. I've also received a couple $500 donations from other people in our community, but they've all been individuals. I have not received any monies from any corporations or unions or anything like that. So honestly, the majority of my funds are going to be regular people, because to get to 5,000, that honestly, the other 3,000 is regular people that give anywhere from $20 to $99 or $150, that are just people in the community that know me and support me, and look forward to having me continue to serve as their mayor.
Just like in 2014, I've set a standard for myself. Well, I will not accept any contributions from anybody who is either in negotiations with the city, or who does business with the city, or holds a contract with the city. My contributions, and I encourage everyone to go to the city clerk website to look at the campaign disclosure forms that were up to the time at the beginning of the campaign season to the 22nd of September. Those are all reported and disclosed on the website, so you can see. All of my contributions have come from individuals. They've ranged from $50 to $500. And I've also provided myself a loan early on so that I could order the signs so they could be here in time to actually start campaigning.
So I'm proud to say that my major financial supporters, and by the way, the largest donation that I've gotten is $1,000, and I've gotten a few of them, and they've all been from local business owners, which means a lot to me. Some of them I actually helped them get started with their businesses, some at Alameda Point. And my smallest donation is, I believe, $35, and everything in between. My donations are also all from individuals, the majority Alameda residents, although I have friends and family outside of the area. And again, we're meeting all the financial reporting, and it's very nice now because you do your filing online, and so it's all discoverable. But I do think it's important that you run a grassroots campaign, you do as much with as little as possible, and what we're doing is trying to get out and reach as many people as possible, walking door to door, which I love, which I've done since the library campaign. And I will say I have some friends who are helping walk in their respective neighborhoods, but there's nothing quite like getting out and going door to door and meeting people. So I'm gonna get out and get the word out about me as well as I can with as much funding as I have, but there's nothing that takes the place of grassroots door-to-door campaigning.
Okay, our next audience question is, with Alameda's love of small business as opposed to national chains, how do you think the city should assist small business owners cope with a nearly 40% increase in the minimum wage from $11 to $15 an hour in just 2 years? We'd hate to lose them.
One of the thoughts that I think we have to keep in mind is, again, we live in a very high cost of living area, and we have a shrinking middle class, and we've done what little we can in raising the minimum wage, which, by the way, the state of California, we're just going to be 2 years behind the state of California in their drive to get the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I think the most important thing we can do for small businesses is to let the public, the buying public, who are the customers of the small businesses, know why we did what we did, why it is important to make sure that we take one small step to, at least that's in our control, to restore the middle class. And there are things that we can do. For example, we have a business. Anybody who runs a business here in Alameda knows you have a business license and you're taxed on your revenues. And I think we can monitor this and work with the business associations to reach the businesses and perhaps freeze the increase in the business license tax during that period of ramp up, because then it's an offset. It is very important, though, that we begin to work to close the shrinking middle class and to improve the lot of the people who are on the very bottom rung of our social ladder. I think that's our duty as a council, and it's our duty also to help make sure that we can soften the landing for the most vulnerable of our businesses.
So this council did vote last night 4-1 to raise the minimum wage. We, as a city, have paid the lowest minimum wage in the Bay Area. And this is just unconscionable at a time when housing prices are going up, the cost of living in the Bay Area is high. We always balance a number of competing interests as council members, and that's part of the job. So what we did is we looked to other communities, and right next door in Oakland has a higher minimum wage than we did. They got there a little more gradually because they started sooner. We are just late to this party. But if you go to Oakland and if you shop and eat out, I mean, of course we go to Alameda first, but once in a while we leave the island, you will see that there are a number of individually owned businesses, and they're flourishing, and more districts in Oakland are vibrant and flourishing. And so I have that expectation for our small businesses too, and the studies do show that it's easier to attract and retain employees. But the question was what if you're paying them a decent wage? And what we don't want is to know that our restaurant workers are then sleeping in their cars overnight because they couldn't afford the rent. I mean, we can't just pretend that we're not living in some rough economic times, and there is homelessness here. I want to, I'm going to do a council referral to do a procurement policy for the city. That's something that the council would vote on, to make sure that we publish a list of all the supplies that the city buys in a year from vendors, and to make that list available to all of our vendors, manufacturers, what have you, in Alameda, to give them the first shot at bidding on those contracts or selling, because we need to put our money where our mouth is, not just say shop local, we need to do it too.
So, first of all, in regards, I want to share that all of our council members have expressed interest in having our city manager purchase locally. And I'm just going to say, okay, that kind of goes to why it's important to have a strong city manager, someone that really cares about our community. So last night, I'd actually done the referral to increase minimum wage after hearing from our chains that they lose employees to surrounding cities, and that they cannot increase the minimum wage at their store or pay higher, that it actually has to be based on the minimum wage. However, when we went through the outreach to our city, to our businesses here in town, especially our business groups, and they came last night also, they expressed serious concern, especially our restaurants and other service industries. So other cities have considered and have where you have a different rate. The state also has that. I think the states is if you have 25 or less employees, you actually have a lower rate. And so that was something that I was interested in, and I did oppose it last night. Another consideration we were asked to consider was our businesses that provide health insurance. The chamber thought we should give consider some kind of credit for the employers that provide health insurance, because they buy it, they get it at a better rate than an individual can. And if our focus is on the minimum wage as opposed to health insurance without any credit, we could absolutely hurt our employees that are currently receiving the minimum wage plus health insurance through their employer. So we were asked to not think one size fits all, but to think about, what works for what business in order to really support our local mom and pop or smaller independent businesses. And I am willing to do that. I think that was very important.
Again, what is your plan for mitigating increasing traffic flow in Alameda. Point 1, please address freeway access through Oakland. 2, increasingly dense housing. 3, traffic plans, bikes, buses, and scooters. I think that would be Ms.
Okay, so, good question, because I will maintain that we as a city and we as a region are underhoused. We have created far more jobs in the last decade with the tech boom than we have created housing, and that's leading to supply and demand and eventually pushing people out of Alameda and sometimes onto the street. So freeway access through Oakland. The first thing is to get people out of their single occupancy vehicles, because we know that the majority of single occupancy vehicles through the tube in the morning are going to one of the Oakland BART stations or to work in downtown Oakland. We need better alternatives because we're not going to widen that freeway. But some of you will take buses, some people do now, and a plan that has been underway since I was on the planning board 12 years ago has to do with going through the tube into Oakland. You should be able to, rather than get in the right lane and go right, and right again to get onto Jackson, you should be able, especially if you're a queue jumping electric bus, stay in the left lane and make your first left turn on 6th Street, and that parallels the freeway, and you would get on the freeway there. But again, once you get there, you're going to sit in traffic, because I don't have that magic wand to remove traffic coming from elsewhere. But what I want to do in Alameda, we have a proposal for a bike pedestrian bridge from Alameda Landing to Jack London Square. If the feasibility study works out and we can get funding from all the different sources, that would help get people out of their cars. All of our developers for new developments pay into a transit management authority, which has done things like added the Line 19 bus back in at the northern waterfront to get more bus riders, and is also doing shuttles to BART. We're going to increase the shuttles to BART. There will be water taxis to across the estuary to Jack London Square, and we're adding a 3rd ferry terminal at Alameda Point because we're an island and we do water transit really well. Thank you. There's more.
What was the second one? This one.
Increasingly dense housing.
All right, so the freeway access is a regional project that is planned to take place, that we have been working on with Alameda County Transportation Commission for years, but honestly, it should be happening soon now. It is funded, it will be happening. So that'll help. However, of course, getting more people out of their cars will help more. Last mile access is what we call it, trying to get to the ferries or BART, and that's something that I, as part of Alameda County Transportation Commission, we've been trying to improve the last mile access, whether it's getting there by bicycle, pedestrian, or driving, or taking the bus or a shuttle, somehow connecting you to the ferries and BART so that you then can take public access. So focusing on that last mile access is critical. Another thing is the shuttle. The number one response when the survey went out from the city, from the public as well as business, is what can we do, is look at having our own shuttle that would then connect us to the ferry, BART, both sides of town. And that is a priority to me as well as our community, of course, and it's something that I actually push very hard to have it be part of our transportation plan for consideration. It was not on there initially. I think it is important that we look at that. We are working with AC Transit to improve their on-time reliability. They currently say 25%. That's not good enough, right? We know that. So we are working with our partner to encourage them and try to figure out moving the bus stops. How do we make it so that they are on time more often? And that can help a lot, because if they're not on time, you're going to be less likely to take them. So working with our partners, exploring different things. Most recently, I met with Caltrans about just making improvements in the tube to help us.
What I would want to do as mayor is not my plan, but the plan that I voted to approve and the council approved. It's called the Transportation Choices Plan. And my aim as mayor is to keep the council focused in on making sure that we implement that plan. We implement, we measure to make sure that what we've implemented actually works, and we adapt as we need to. That structure is already in place, and I think the biggest challenge for the mayor and when I sit there is to make sure that we stay focused on that and we hold the city manager accountable for moving those kind of plans that the community gave input in, the transit providers gave input in, the residents and the owners of properties put input in. We need to implement those. As far as freeway access goes, it's been mentioned already that Broadway-Jackson interchange has been examined, engineered, and planned for years. Any freeway access to 880 that involves a yield at a senior center that's on the side as you move to the tube to get onto the on-ramp has to be addressed, but we can't hold our breath for that. It was on the books back when I was on the council before. It's on now, so I think we need to adapt to what we have now, work our plan now, and be very careful about the next housing element that comes in, how we plan that additional regional housing need allocation along existing transit lines. I think that's going to be a very important discussion that this city is going to have come 2020, 2022.
My turn. Okay, the next, give it to that lady, Ashley. Okay, next question from the audience. The unfunded liabilities from our retirement programs have been said to be causing Alameda to be unable to provide basic services. What specifically, underlined, do you propose to do to reduce this liability?
Okay, so the unfunded pension liabilities is approximately $250 million right now. Our deferred maintenance is approximately $300 million. And when I had to speak to this, I talked about it at a public meeting. I said, this is the first time I've talked about over $500 million is owed. We have a serious problem. And what I have asked our staff to do is to actually consider hiring someone, an expert, to come in and look at our books and help us figure this out. The most recent forecast is within 5 years, our expenditures are greater than our revenues. I actually did not support I do value the work of our public safety. Our last contract when I first became mayor, I did not support. I think we cannot continue to make deals that we cannot afford. We have to be willing to have that serious conversation. What has been happening is every 2 years, you're being asked to pay some additional tax. In my opinion, that prolongs when we actually have that conversation. And just like when you keep your books, whether you're running a business or your own personal finances, the longer you delay having a serious conversation, the worse it gets. We cannot continue to charge more and more and more for our parks, our libraries, things that everyone uses. It's almost 80% of our budget is salaries. I can't tell you, go to Transparent California and you will see many people in our city earning over $300,000 a year. You will see many earning over $200,000 a year. I usually interact with city staff. I'm making $15,000 a year. They're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. We can't continue to do that. We have got to stop entering into contracts we can't afford.
I think we've had very serious conversations and actually taken very serious actions as a council in these last 4 years to address the unfunded pension liabilities. We have continued to provide basic services. Actually, they're very good services. When you call 911 and you need a police officer or you need a paramedic, we have very, very good response time, but that comes at a cost. And in that last contract extension, one of the provisions that addresses directly the unfunded liability is the contribution increase from the employee back into a fund that was matched by the city to start reducing that unfunded liability on the out years. And that was a serious conversation. That 6-year extension included 1 year of 0. But it did get a approximately 4% return of salary back into funding unfunded other post-employment benefits for public safety. We also instituted a policy, and we're contributing anytime that we get over a certain percentage of our policy stated reserve fund, otherwise known as the fund balance. We contribute that into a trust fund to offset and to plan for the PERS, what they call Public Employees Retirement Smoothing, that's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years, where the PERS contributions from the Cs are going to have to go up. And lastly, I see more of having our employees shoulder a larger percentage of the pension contributions, because the city can't sustain itself if we've gone continually on how we've done it in the past.
Thank you. That's a good, serious question, and it is something that I take seriously, but we have to take action. We can't just talk about things. And I represent Alameda on the League of California Cities, and I go to every seminar on how cities can reduce and eliminate their CalPERS and OPEB liability. In fact, I'm going to go to one in Southern California this month, even though I normally don't travel during a campaign, just one day in and out, because it's so important. So what we have done, even before this council, and before the state instituted something called PEPRA, is we now have a 2-tiered system for our more recent, and it's mostly public safety, because they're the ones who do make good salaries for good reason, but their benefits are also rich, but they are now paying more toward their own benefits, much the way a private plan would be, and we don't have automatic health coverage for your spouse for life. That's something you could pay extra for if you want it. I came back from a League of California Cities meeting on CalPERS liability, and I said, this is what we have to do. And fortunately, 3 of my 4 colleagues agreed with me. We have to take in the good years, and we're in good years right now, we have to take half of our unanticipated revenue, and we have to set it aside, pay it directly toward our CalPERS liability. We also have to set some of it aside in a lockbox that can only be used to pay down our CalPERS liability, our OPEB, the other than pension employee benefits. And already in the 2 years since we've done that, we have paid an additional $15 million toward our CalPERS liability that is continuing, and we are saving $100,000 a year on the finance charge toward that debt that can go back into the general fund. We also have to make smart decisions when hiring. If we can hire consultants or non-sworn employees that are not PERSable, they don't come with those pensions, we still want to protect our city, but we need to be smart in our hiring. Thank you.
Okay, our next question from the audience is, how would you approach homeless people in Alameda?
As mayor, I would urge the council to continue what we've put into place in the last 2 years, and that is getting service providers mobile in the city to begin caseworking with homeless people who are residents on the street. We have Operation Dignity, which runs the homeless veterans housing out at Alameda Point, who we extended the contract to so that they could help case manage people who find themselves living on the street in Alameda. We also have a parcel in Alameda, a former federal parcel at Central Avenue near McKay that has been conveyed through HUD to our local provider, who is going to establish a wellness center for formerly homeless people and to provide housing for people who have been homeless, who have medical conditions where they cannot live on their own. I think those are 2 things that we're doing immediately. I think this problem is one that requires regional and county support. That the city has no comparable ability to provide, and I'm seeing that is starting and coordinating. But I think that as mayor, this has to be kept at the forefront and directed in a way that we can take advantage of every agency or level of government that's above us to help address the conditions that allow people to end up on the street, whether it's mental health care, whether it's jobs, and whether it's connecting people to housing. Those are all things that have to be coordinated. It's a massive issue that I think is going to be with us for a long time.
Thank you. Homelessness and housing issues are also one of my top priorities, and another one of those sessions I always go to at League of California Cities conferences. So what we know now today is that there is no one cause of homelessness. The conventional wisdom used to be that the homeless had substance abuse problems, mental health problems, a combination thereof. There is still a percentage of homeless with those issues, make no mistake, but more and more we're seeing two-parent working families raising children in a van under a freeway overpass. In Alameda, when I've helped with the point-in-time count, not only do we have homeless sleeping in our parks, we have homeless sleeping in their cars at the overflow ferry parking down past the dog park on Main Street. And so the way we approach homelessness is intelligently and with compassion. And as my colleague alluded to, we do contract as a city with Operation Dignity that does that mobile outreach. This is great. We also need to support the McKay Avenue project. We also, the best way to address homelessness is not to let it happen to begin with. And that means don't push people out of our town because the rents are going up so high, so please vote no on Measure K. And we also need, as a city, we need help building affordable housing. We want to do it. It is very complicated to get all the various funding sources together. On the state ballot in November, please vote yes on Props 1 and 2. And the McKay Avenue facility is an excellent way that we will be able to address the needs of frail, elderly, homeless, in need of assisted living and hospice and respite care. Thank you.
So as you've heard, we as a council have funded Operation Dignity, and that's very important. When they came to us and did their report recently, they were going to be requesting more monies at the budget time. And at that time, I, as mayor, suggested and requested that we actually fund it sooner rather than waiting for the budget process. And I want to thank our council for supporting that so that we did expedite that funding. This is something our entire council, and I'm going to submit our entire community, cares about. And our police, they interact with our homeless all the time, and they try their hardest, and they are trained specially of how to connect them to Operation Dignity, and also to try to make sure, as well as our fire department, we have a program where they reach out to people to make sure that if they're on medications, if they've been recently released from the hospital, just follow up with them and see if they're getting the services they need. So I do want to thank our public safety for helping so much on this issue. Funding affordable housing is important. When Side A came to us recently, actually it was quite a while ago now, initially it tethered, what we call tethered, the funding of the affordable housing with the market rate. At some point the developer came back and asked for that to be untethered. I voted no. I think it's critical. That's the first time our city has untethered the funding of affordable with market rate housing. That was a 4-to-1 vote. I think at that point, no, we need to keep it so that the developer who develops market rate housing is ultimately, right then, the most incentive is to not untether it. Make sure they know you're not going to get to sell your market rate until you make sure that that affordable is funded. So I push back, and I know, and I have last night, I voted to support Eden's efforts. Eden is doing great trying, but they needed the developer to help out more.
Thank you, candidates. At this time, we would like to offer 2 minutes for each of you to have a closing statement, and we will do that in reverse order from where we started.
with a microphone and no extra sound effects. Thank you, all of you, for being such an attentive audience here tonight. One of the things I've learned from my work with the League of California Cities is that the decisions that impact all of you the most closely, the most personally, happen at the local level, whether it's affecting your property value, your day-to-day lives, how you get in and out of your town, happen at the local level. So it is so important who you choose to be your elected leaders. And I come to you ready and willing and able to serve. I have, in addition to my 6 years on council, 6 years on the planning board before that, I serve on the League of California Cities statewide policy committee on housing, community, and economic development, which gives me a statewide as well as regional perspective, in addition to my local perspective on how to address complicated issues like more affordable housing and addressing homelessness. I also serve on the liaison committee with AC Transit, because public transit is so essential for our city, and I sit on the subcommittee with the Alameda Unified School District. And I'm ready to put all of my skills to work for this community. I believe that you have to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. I try to use my bicycle to get around as much as possible and encourage other people that it's possible too. And what I find so encouraging when I'm out walking door to door is that, unlike sometimes at council where people complain a lot about things, people love living in Alameda. Yes, they're concerned about traffic and transit, but they get that we need more housing and they want to be a part of the solution, and I want to be your next mayor. I would welcome your support. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to us and taking your evening to participate in probably the most important election of the last few years. I look back on my service to you as a council member in the early days, and whether it was getting Nob Hill from a vacant, a decrepit shopping center to a thriving Bridgeside Center, or whether it was instead of looking at the Lynn Oaks Motel, we're looking at a main library, or whether it was trying to figure out what to do to revitalize downtown, or to actually execute and build the Alameda Theater Complex and restore the historic theater. Those were great things to be involved in, but now the stakes are higher. And I offer that we need to have a stable city hall, we need to have stable city management, because that's the form of government we do have. Regardless of the initial question, we do have the manager-council form of government. I understand that form of government. I have the temperament to lead a council and to focus us on the work that's in front of us, to work efficiently at our council meetings, to come to a conclusion and make a decision, to move forward always in the best interest of the city, always with a civil tone, to make sure that we maintain the quality of life here so that we thrive, so that we have a future development that's reasonable, so that we can sustain this city in the face of climate change, which is real. I ask for your support, I ask for your consideration, I ask for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
So, many of you I know had questions that you submitted that weren't answered. Email me, trish@mayortrish.com. Stop me at the store, many of you do it all the time anyway. Follow up. I'm happy to answer your questions anytime and try to serve you. And this is something that I have done for the last 4 years. Honestly, I did it when I was on the school board. I did it as a mom of 4 kids in this town, trying to help each other. And that's honestly one of the best things of Alamedans. We try to help each other. So honestly, continue to feel free to reach out to me anytime. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve you. I'd like to share, I am the first Hispanic mayor of Alameda. That's good news. We are a diverse community. It's nice to have people from different backgrounds. I grew up, my father learned English as a second language. I'm one of 5 kids. A lot of times money was hard to come by. For a short time we were on food stamps. We currently rent. I raised 4 children here, and that's real life, and it's something I'm very proud of. I love talking with people, serving people, and we've done some really good work. I'm going to say this council honestly has stepped up. There's things that go wrong, but we step up. We show up every other Tuesday. We show up in between, and we make sure the work gets done. And I encourage you to continue to participate, dream big, because we have been delivering. I look out around and I see, okay, we do have the Navy Museum. It's amazing that we still have that. It's amazing. We have to continue to work together to do it. We've started Second Fridays. We've gotten more public art happening. Money that used to be sitting, not being spent, we've stepped up. We're spending it. You're going to see new public art all around this town. And we're a thriving community. So let's continue.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our candidates for their participation in this evening's forum. Thank you. So we're going to take a short break now, back in about 10 minutes or so. All right, the second portion of this evening's forum is a pros and cons presentation of two of our local ballot measures. Our presenter is Karen Butter, who is the Action Chair for the League of Women Voters in Alameda and past President of the League of Women Voters of Alameda. Since we have limited time, both measures will be presented by Karen and then questions taken as time allows. Karen?
Thanks, Ken. I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me. I'll try to speak into the microphone. Before I begin, I wanted to call your attention to a piece of paper that was on your seat called Alameda City 2018 Campaign Contributions. This is something that the League put together this year, taking the data from the city clerk's website, from the candidates' filings, and I encourage you all to take a look at it. This represents the filings up to, I think it was September 22nd for the mayoral candidates. At the forum next week for City Council, we will have a similar document for City Council candidates. Additionally, you can look on the League of Women Voters Alameda website to find the data. And I also encourage you to read all of the explanatory information to help understand the data. So please take a look at this, and you can also go to the City Clerk's website to get updated information. With that said, I will then begin to go over the pros and cons for the two local ballot measures. There are only two local measures. There are a couple measures for the Peralta Community Colleges and for East Bay Regional Parks that I think will be covered next week. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is the City of Alameda Essential Services Measure F. And the question that appears to voters is, shall the measure maintaining the City of Alameda's financial stability and protecting services and infrastructure such as police response to violent crimes and burglaries, 911 emergency medical and fire response, maintaining neighborhood parks, repairing potholes, maintaining streets and protecting the bay from pollution by enacting a 0.5% sales tax until repealed by voters, providing approximately $5 million annually in locally controlled revenues, requiring independent audits and public spending review be adopted. So the current situation is that the tax on retail sales in Alameda is 9.25%, of which the city receives 1%, with the remaining 8.25% sent to the state, county, and BART. Revenues from the current sales tax generates approximately $10.4 million annually and is expected to remain relatively flat. The city projects a deficit of $4.7 million by FY 21-22. So the proposed ordinance would authorize an additional 0.5% transaction and use tax for Alameda City that would increase the total sales tax to 9.75%. In comparison, sales tax in Berkeley and Oakland is 9.25%, and it's 9.75% in Albany, Hayward, Newark, San Leandro, and Union City. The measure requires a yearly independent audit reviewed annually by City Council and would continue until repealed by voters. So the Measure F would bring in approximately $5 million a year in revenues and will fund operating or capital expenditures such as fire, police, park, and beach maintenance, street repairs, etc., anything that comes out of the general fund. It would be effective on April 1st, 2019, and the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration would issue the first monthly payment to the city in June 2019. So a yes vote means that the sales tax will increase by 0.5% effective April 1st, 2019. A no vote means the sales tax would remain at 9.25%. What do the supporters say? Alameda is facing significant budget shortfalls. Delays in maintaining streets, parks, and beaches means the quality of life in Alameda will decline. The measure supports the goal of ensuring recurrent revenues versus one-time revenues and that meet expenditures, and perhaps even helps to reduce the city's annual contributions to the retirement systems. Measure F will maintain 21 community parks and keep pollution out of the bay, address the $25 million backlog in repairing potholes, repaving streets, and maintaining fast 911 response. State and federal government cannot touch the funds raised through Measure F. Annual audits ensure that the funds are spent properly. Essential purposes such as groceries and medicines are exempt. The opponents say there are no restrictions on how the City Council will spend the additional revenues. The categories listed in the ballot measure are only suggestions and not mandates. There is no guarantee that the City Council will use the additional revenues to reduce operating deficits, and that sales tax are a regressive form of taxation that hit the lower and middle income households the hardest. And finally, an additional increase in the City of Alameda's already high sales tax could impact local sales negatively. So that is Measure F. Any questions? Okay, I'll move on to Measure K. Measure K is the Rent Charter Amendment Initiative. And the question before the voters is, shall the charter be amended by incorporating Ordinance 3148, the city's rent review, rent stabilization, and limitations on eviction law, with the following modifications. Number one, it would preclude the City Council from amending the law in response to changing conditions and concerns, and require voter approval instead. And number two, it would eliminate the December 31st, 2019 sunset clause. So the situation is that in March 2016, as many of you may remember, the Alameda City Council adopted Ordinance 3148, a rent control ordinance. On August 8th, 2016, the City Council voted to place the ordinance on the November 8th, 2016 ballot. Voters approved the ordinance, including the provision that the City Council retain authority to amend the ordinance in response to changing conditions and concerns. So the current ordinance, 3148, limits rent increases to once a year, allows renters to challenge a rent increase of any amount, no matter how small, requires a review process for all rent increases above 5%, which can result in a binding and enforceable restriction on the rent increases, provides a mediation process for residents living in units that are otherwise not subject to rent control. It requires landlords to pay relocation fees when property owners need to terminate tenancy through no fault of the tenant, and it limits grounds upon which a landlord may terminate tenancy. The ordinance remains in effect until December 31st, 2019, unless the City Council amends it. This proposal, that Measure K that's going before the voters, would add the ordinance into the city charter, so it would not make any changes in 3148 other than to put it into the city charter with two significant changes. Number one, it would require a vote of the people to amend the ordinance, And number two, it would extend the ordinance indefinitely until voters amend or repeal it. The fiscal effect, there is no fiscal effect on the city's budget, as the program is completely funded by fees collected from Alameda property owners, and it would continue if Measure K were enacted. In cases of no fault or no cause evictions, landlords must pay for relocation benefits of around $1,595, periodically adjusted for inflation. Additionally, landlords must pay the equivalent of 1 month's rent for each year of rental, up to 4 months' rent for these types of evictions. What a yes vote means is that the current ordinance remains in effect with 2 changes. The ordinance will not sunset on December 31st, 2019, and the ordinance can only be changed by a vote of the people, not by the city council. A no vote means that the current ordinance will continue until December 31st, 2019, unless the city council extends it or modifies it. So what do supporters say? Supporters say whether you own or rent, the cost of housing is too high. Measure K will protect our seniors, working families, and our most vulnerable residents. They also say that Measure K is a common sense initiative that will protect Alameda's rent control law and prevent politicians from changing it in the future. By putting the people of Alameda in charge, Measure K protects our rent control system and ensures that it will continue to work for tenants and property owners alike. Additionally, Measure K will cap rent increases at 5% annually and require a hearing to approve a larger increase. Landlords will not be permitted to evict tenants just to raise rent, but can evict tenants who violate the terms of their lease. And finally, when a tenant is terminated for no cause, the units withdrawn from the market or demolished, Measure K will provide relocation assistance where tenants must find new housing. Opponents say Measure K locks Ordinance 3148 into the city charter and can be changed only by a vote of the people. Under Measure K, all changes require a costly, time-consuming election, regardless of whether it's to fix minor errors or to remedy major flaws. Ordinance 3148 is a good start, but the housing policy is very complicated, and the ordinance will need continual modifications as state law changes. And finally, we should be practical in addressing the housing crisis and maintain flexibility to adapt to unique circumstances in Alameda. So that's Measure F and Measure K. Any questions about either one of them? Yes?
She's going to take the microphone into the audience, so hand her the microphone.
Oh.
Yes, I just wanted to say that in your review, you kept calling Ordinance 3148 a rent control law, and that's not correct. It is the rent stabilization law. There's a big difference because control means you have a cap. There is no cap in Ordinance 3148. There is a threshold over which a 5% rent increase triggers a review process, and many of the rents that come out of the rent review are over 5%. So when you have rents that are over 5%, you don't have a cap. So I think that needs to be clarified.
Thank you. As we said, it's a very complicated issue, and language is important.
Thank you. And my question actually relates to the last question and then your statement about the importance of clarity of language. My understanding is that you all, the League of Women Voters Alameda, took a position in opposition to Measure K, and that's based on good governance. But my question is actually if you all can or would address some of the accuracy of some of the claims that have been made, whether by supporters or by opponents of Measure K.
Thank you. First, as you said, we took a position, and technically this is a pros and cons, and so we're really just trying to present the facts and not to take a position based upon study. The league has not studied rent control, rent stabilization, so we don't have any position on that to speak of. And so all we can speak to are the positions that we have, and the one that applies here is in relationship to good governance and what should be in a city charter and what should not be in a city charter. So I'm not sure that I can really answer the question entirely, but that's where we are now in terms of this measure. Any other questions? Oh, over there.
Yes, when you were talking about Measure F, you mentioned some connection between the proposed tax for essential city services and funding pensions for city staff, and I didn't quite get the connection there.
The Measure F, the funds that would be raised under Measure F would go into the general fund. And as I understand it, all of the pension liabilities are also coming out of the general fund. So, you know, it's an overarching fund that supports city services. And so the liability would also be in that general fund line item as well. So that's where the connection lies, as I understand it.
This is a two-part question. First, I want to clarify for the record, does all of the half-cent tax increase in Measure F go directly to the general fund, or does the state get to take any of it?
No, it all goes to the general fund.
Okay. And the second question is, so what you're saying is, in response to the earlier question, theoretically at least, the city council could decide to allocate part of this half-cent sales tax income towards reducing our pension liabilities, correct?
Okay. That's... Yes, that's my understanding.
So pertaining to the question that was asked earlier about the claims that may be made by both supporters and the opposition of a proposition, does the League have any position on clarity and truth in political messages or advertisement?
That's certainly one issue that individuals should look at when they are evaluating ballot measures. And sometimes it's very hard to try to figure out what people are really saying. But one of the basic principles is to try to look at what is in the ballot measure. And the other thing that one can do is to look at who's supporting it and who's opposing it and where the money is coming from. And you know, that takes a little bit more digging. And I don't know if you're like me, but watching the news tonight and last night, I get bombarded with Proposition 6 and Proposition 10, and you know, both sides of the issue come at you, and so it's really hard sometimes to figure out who's really truthful in all of this. But trying to figure out who the opponents and supporters are and which organizations you trust and where some of the money is coming from. I think there was a... Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned Voter's Edge. Voter's Edge is a fantastic resource, and I think we have bookmarks in the back, and that really helps you to identify where sources of money are coming from. So I'd encourage everybody to look at Voter's Edge. Thank you.
Karen, regarding Measure F, is there an alternative way to raise money for the general fund other than a sales tax, or is a sales tax the only reasonable way of raising those funds?
you're getting beyond my financial knowledge. I may have to call upon some others. There are certainly a number of ways that cities can use to raise funds. And the Alameda City did some surveys early this year or late last year to try to identify what some of the priorities were for the projects. And they could have gone with a parcel tax, and they could have gone with other kinds of bonds. There's two disadvantages, and those would not necessarily be going into the general fund. The general fund gives the city much more flexibility in how they use the money. They don't have to identify ahead of time which funds they're spending, they're going to spend the money on. So the flexibility is a really nice way. But with the other parcel tax or other types of bonds, you would have to be very specific, and you would have to put it for a specific period of time. So 10 years, 20 years, 25 years. So that's where some of the limitations come in the options that the city has in raising funds. There may be other options as well. As I said, I'm not the financial expert, but the general fund and the sales tax gives the city the most flexibility without being specific. Any other questions? Did you have another question? Okay.
My question was related to campaign financing, and I know that there was some talk earlier about financing for, I guess, individual candidates, and I was interested if you all will be sharing any information about the funding or the financing behind the committees, particularly related to Measure K.
We decided to start out small and put our feet in the water. As you may know, some of you may know, the city just moved to a new system in order to report on campaign finance. And so when we started this project, we weren't sure exactly how it was going to work. The old system was extremely cumbersome. This new system is much, much easier now that we've gone through one cycle. We are only doing this time around the mayoral and the city council. I would hope that, in the future we can do more, but we had to get our feet wet and figure out how to make the system work. I would encourage all of you to go to the city's website, because it's really easy to use, and you can see where the money is coming in and who's funding what. So that's the option. And I know that I've seen some websites where people have been putting up some of that information as well. So other people are using the database in order to mine it. So it's out there, but the league is not going to do anything about that this time around. I think we probably need to close it, and with that I'm going to turn it over to Ken, and here he is. So thank you all, and remember to vote.
Okay, we're coming into the close here. I just wanted to thank Karen very much. She's my mentor as it relates to political insights. So we've reached the end of our time this evening, and we're going to be coming to a close. I just want to remind everyone, this is our little commercial, there's a big poster back there. Looks like this. I want to mention we have 2 more forums coming up, or fora, I guess is the correct plural. The next one is Thursday, October 11th, same time, same building, but we got demoted to the basement. So hopefully they have better electronics down there, and we'll hope for the best. So that's going to be candidates for City Council, which promises to be quite interesting. And then October 25th, we have little flyers available if you want to take one with you, is the state and regional ballot propositions, and that will be at the Phoenix Workspace, which is right next to 7-Eleven on Lincoln, right by Oak. It used to be the What did it used to be? Yeah, that, what she said. Okay, so now that you know what you're doing for the next couple of weeks, I'd like to call upon our president, Georgia Gates Durr, who is here somewhere. Oh, geez.
You're back.
Yeah. Boy, isn't that true?
To leave what I'm supposed to read here.
Oh.
This has all been just going like clockwork. Marion's already putting up the stop sign. So I'm just going to briefly read this, and the microphone is still working, which we're grateful for. Be sure to go to the polls on Tuesday, November 6th to vote or complete and return your mail-in ballot prior to November 6th. We encourage you to check on the League's voter education website, votersedge.org. I think everyone had one of these bookmarks. It's an online guide of elections, and again, as Karen Butter pointed out, you can follow the money on Voter's Edge. You can also obtain the address of your polling place at this website, as well as on the back cover of your voter booklet. And again, thank you for coming and hanging in here the whole night with us. We hope to see you on October 11th downstairs. Have a good evening and drive safely.